Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base. Emil Robinson Smith will be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Hope you've all had a wonderful, restful, and rejuvenative weekend, and we're glad to be with you to start the week in many ways this Sunday, January 19th, with the third Falcon 9 launch of the year from Vandenberg Space Force Base. As you can see on the slate, this is the Starlink 11-8 mission. Interesting because this is the first time that SpaceX will have launched this many Starlink V2 minis all at once. 27 are on board the Falcon 9 rocket getting ready to depart from Space Launch Complex 4 East in less than 30 minutes. This launch pushing from Saturday planned liftoff time, now targeting later on this morning in T-minus 27 minutes, 36 seconds and counting, for a teaser liftoff at 7:35 a.m. Pacific, 10:35 a.m. Eastern, 15:35 UTC. We'll talk more about the payload on board those Starlink V2 mini satellites in just a moment. But first, want to welcome in the nearly 1,000 of you who are joining with us live as we're kicking off our coverage. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream. It'll allow the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring some more folks on into this live launch coverage. Also want to thank our moderator in the live chat, Steely, and we'll keep our eyes peeled for any of the other mods as they may happen to pop in and join us this morning. These live streams are made possible by our wonderful channel member community, so if you'd like to be a part of it, you can go ahead and click that join button just beneath the video here. Thanks to the folks who are already making this coverage possible, folks like Grandpa Jim Pondu, Fraser the Dude, Rob Marine Forever, Joni Mahoney, JJ Jones, Sulfur for Lunch, James Fowley, Steve Ano, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Last little bit of housekeeping here. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space and spaceflight, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature, and not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now all in one fell swoop, and that is always greatly appreciated. So thanks to folks like Kumar John for a 20 rupee Super Chat. No comment, just offering a little support this morning. Appreciate you, Kumar. Taking a look at the weather outlook for those in and around the area of Vandenberg or to the south of the pad where the rocket's going to be flying. As far as visibility, this may not be the greatest one for all of those folks out that way. Tell you the good news first. The good news is there is not fog at the pad level area, so as far as seeing the liftoff, that should be pretty decent. We should have a good view of the Falcon 9 rocket. The not so great news, as you're seeing from this live satellite imagery from the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, it is quite overcast today down in central and southern California, so my guess is it may be difficult for some to be able to see the Falcon 9 rocket after it makes its ascent this morning. So The majority of us will probably be relying on the onboard camera views from the Falcon 9, and that is a-okay. As we're getting rolling here, let's go ahead and talk about the nominal sequence of events that we're expecting during this countdown timeline here. SpaceX has confirmed that they are in prop load. So we'll go ahead and step through some of the early parts of this countdown timeline. Bring up to speed to where we are right now. Of course, the fueling process starts with the permission to step into fueling. Happens around T-minus 38 minutes when the SpaceX launch director completes that poll, which is done electronically. Prop load begins at T-minus 35 minutes with the loading of RP-1, that is a rocket-grade kerosene, aboard the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes, they begin loading cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same will happen on the second stage about 5 or so minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes is when the second stage RP-1 tank is full. And at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, the conditioning of the feed lines on the strongback happens prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. See it visually manifest when we've got eyes on the rocket around T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds at pad 40, T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds thereabouts at pad 39A. It's about T-minus 20 minutes, 20 seconds here at Vandenberg as well, the so-called big vent. And that venting continues as the conditioning rolls on until they're ready to step into second stage LOX load, which begins at the T-minus 16-minute mark. T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket gets underway. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. And at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence gets underway. It's when the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up. Then the transporter erector of the strong back reclines about 13 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket here at Vandenberg. Stays in that position until liftoff. T-minus 3 minutes is when the first stage LOX load is complete. Same is true on the second stage about a minute after that, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as you hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlins are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. It's coming up in T-minus 19 minutes, 50 seconds. Or at 7:35 a.m. Pacific, 10:35 a.m. Eastern, 15:35 UTC. Nearly at the top of the minute, heading into 7:36, and so on and so on. So as soon as the clock hits exactly 7:35, don't expect to see movement. It's closer to 7:36 by around 10 seconds or so. Time now T minus 18 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. At this point, the big vent will be currently underway as they're continuing to condition the feed lines prior to second stage LOX load. As has been the case with Falcon 9 rockets heading to support the 11th group of Starlink V2 minis on orbit, this too will be a southeast trajectory launch. Let's go ahead and give you a visual idea of what exactly that means. After departing from Space Launch Complex 4 East, or Slick 4E, at Vandenberg Space Force Base, Falcon 9 will fly in a southeasterly trajectory, moving along the coast of California and Mexico. First stage booster will follow that orange arc and target a touchdown on the SpaceX drone ship called Of Course I Still Love You. If successful, this will be the 117th booster landing on this particular drone ship and the 399th Falcon booster landing to date. And with another launch coming up on the 21st, we're right on the edge of seeing the 400th successful booster landing in history. SpaceX is working to certify its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights apiece, reuse being the vast majority of the flights that it does launch these days. This particular booster on this mission, B1082, will fly for a 10th time today. Talk a little bit more about its flight history here in just a moment. SpaceX also working to certify its payload fairings for up to 40 missions apiece as well. They splash down in the waters of the Pacific Ocean under the support of parachutes, as you can see in this image from a presentation from last year. They save about $6 million per recovery effort. And they're brought aboard a recovery vessel, then brought back into port. They're turned over, refurbished, and readied for a future flight. Time now, T minus 14 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. A little more than a minute into the second stage LOX load process at this point. Let's go ahead and talk about the payload that's on board this Falcon 9 rocket today. As mentioned at the top of the broadcast, this is the first time that SpaceX is launching a total of 27 Starlink V2 mini version of the satellite. And that's because these are not the V2 minis of before. They are what SpaceX calls the optimized V2 mini. Lighter in weight. Here's the size comparison. These current V2 mini optimized satellites weigh about 1,267 pounds, about 575 kilograms. Previous versions were about, as you see, little more than 1,700 pounds or roughly 800 kilograms. This allows SpaceX to, as they say, launch up to 29 of these optimized V2 minis at once, though, of course, we haven't seen them go for quite that many. But this is the first time that they've bumped up beyond 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites. Unclear, though, if these optimized Starlinks have flown during 2024 during a progress report published by SpaceX at the end of this previous year. They phrased it in such a way that suggested that they rolled out, but it's unclear if they have begun flying as well, or if this may be their debut or not. There were several Starlink missions that featured 24 satellites, so it could be the case that some of them did debut in those 24 Starlinks flights. We don't have that information definitively from SpaceX. The image there on the left-hand side of your screen is from an earlier Starlink flight, so there may be a slightly different look to a stack of the V2 minis. Of course, we'll get a quick glimpse of these when the payload fairings are deployed, assuming that there's not a glitch in the video or the downlink from SpaceX. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use Argon Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. They're built in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle, and they'll be deployed at about 183 miles or 295 kilometers in altitude at a 53 degrees inclination. As SpaceX continues to roll out its accessibility for its Starlink internet service, they have added yet another new country on board. The island nation of Tuvalu. And apologies if I mispronounced that, but that is, as SpaceX describes, their 120th country, territory, or market where the Starlink internet service is now available. Here's an image of V2 mini satellite flying on orbit as captured by HEO and Black Sky. This was an image from one of their on-orbit imaging satellites. It was taken last year. This is a rendering of the laser mesh, the laser links that connect the V2 mini satellites on orbit. Per SpaceX's progress report, they have a mesh of more than 13,000 bidirectional laser links. SpaceX states that it allows them to, quote, achieve a low latency of 26 milliseconds and download speeds of about 100 megabits per second. Now T-minus 10 minutes, 2 seconds, and counting. Taking a look back at our live chat real quick. I want to thank the now more than 5,000 of you who are watching with us live this morning. If you haven't already and you're just finding your way in, if you could click that like button for us, allow the YouTube algorithm to bring more eyeballs to this stream, that would be greatly appreciated. I also want to thank a few folks for their support this morning. Thanks to our moderator, channel member, Callistia Lee, for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that generosity, Callistia. To our 10 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Callistia in the live chat if you haven't already. And we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Also want to welcome a new channel member, Ray Bozensky, joining with channel membership at the Pad Leader level. Welcome to you, Ray. And a couple super chats. Want to acknowledge and thank. Good morning to My mother, there in the greater Sacramento area, Mary Robinson, joining us with a very generous $20 super chat. Appreciate that, Mom. Larry King, also with a very generous $20 super chat, saying, good morning. So excited to get out of bed this AM, but as you say, it's totally overcast here. I asked Grok the other day how the booster makes its way to Vandenberg. Interesting story. KHTNC with a super chat here asking, how can I find the flight path? Time permitting, we can go back to the flight trajectory graphic, but broadly speaking, it's flying southeast along the coast of California. And for all the Starlink missions that are flying to the 11th group from Vandenberg, they will also fly southeast. Depends on the inclination into which the rocket is launching into. Mark Potochnik with a $2 super chat, one of our channel members. Thank you, Mark. And a thanks to Chuck Cloves for a very generous $25 super chat. Appreciate you, Chuck. Good to see you this morning. Coming up on T-minus 7 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. At this point, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base, the Falcon 9 rocket is just now getting underway. As I mentioned previously, this will be the 10th flight for Falcon 9 first stage booster B1082 on the SpaceX fleet. So before we go ahead and see launch number 10, let's take a step back through memory lane and review where it has been before we see where it's about to go. Its first launch happened to be a batch of Starlink satellites, Starlink 7-9, lifting off on January 3rd, kicking off the new year. Also kicking off the launch of the direct-to-cell capable Starlink satellites. Another Starlink mission right after that for this booster, Starlink 7-14 on February 15th. Then a mission for the U.S. Space Force. This was USSF 62, featuring the Weather System Follow-on Microwave, or WSFM satellite, part of the Department of Defense Operational Environmental Satellite System. That mission followed by a trio of Starlink flights. You had Starlink 8-2 on May 10th, Starlink 9-1 on June 19th, and Starlink 11-1 on August 4th. Batch of satellites for the OneWeb constellation was up next, OneWeb Flight 20 on October 10th. And then back to Starlink land we go for this booster, Starlink 9-11 on November 14th, and most recently Starlink 11-2 on December 13th.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressing for Starlink retract.
And a good timing, we have B1082 now live for us here. You can see those overcast conditions that I was mentioning around the area of Vandenberg Space Force Base, but fortunately, clear conditions at the pad level, so we've got a good view of the Falcon 9 rocket, surrounded only by the cloud of its own vapor. Just a little more than 4 minutes to go. Soon we'll be seeing those clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings opening up. You see those clamp arms are now open and the strong back starting to move away from the Falcon 9 rocket. SpaceX doesn't often bring up the flight history of its payload fairings beyond mentions during customer missions. Starlink doesn't count in that group, of course. As far as we're aware, the most flown payload fairing half, the flight leader in that regard, has launched on 22 missions. Three minutes to go.
Stage 1 lock slot is complete.
With that call in now less than a minute, we should be hearing a very similar call for the second stage liquid oxygen load. As we're waiting on the call for second stage lock load, want to just quickly thank channel member Grandpa Jim Pondu for a $5 super chat. Thank you, sir. Says for fuel.
Stage 2 lock slot is complete.
Good call from SpaceX. The Falcon 9 rocket is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Shortly, we'll seeing some additional venting. There's the ground gas closeouts. There you go. Call for the Falcon 9 to be in startup will be coming in the next few seconds here.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call. We're now just a few seconds away from the SpaceX launch director giving their go for launch.
LD is go for launch.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and step back, let you listen to the final 30 seconds of the count. We'll be back with additional commentary on the other side of liftoff.
Hold.
Holding.
And we have a hold call because of the way that SpaceX fuels. They are
held
not
for a possible aircraft in the airspace.
Launch report is running.
That's unfortunate. So not a technical issue with the Falcon 9 rocket or the payload on board, but because apparently an aircraft was in the airspace that they needed to launch safely. Because SpaceX is unable to hold through to a later point in their window, this effectively means that they have scrubbed for today. SpaceX uses a load and go style of fueling, and because they have that super cold densified liquid oxygen on board, once fueling has begun, they are locked into a T0. And unfortunately, because someone was in the wrong area at the wrong time, that knocked off the chance for a launch today. So once again, for those who are just joining us, if you happen to miss the call out just now, an errant aircraft happened to enter into SpaceX's airspace, preventing the company from launching safely. There's certain regions along the path that are considered no-go zones during commercial spaceflight or government launch, whatever orbital flight may be happening. And a violation of that airspace, as you just heard, is grounds for a hold. And with other rockets, that's not always necessarily the end of the operations for the day. For example, if there, well, I can give you a recent example when Blue Origin was attempting to launch their inaugural New Glenn rocket. This is a watercraft versus aircraft, but there was a boat that was in the keep out zone as well. And that meant that they had to push their T0 liftoff time by about, I think in that case, it was like 30 something minutes. And that's because they have the ability to hold because they're not using that super cold densified liquid oxygen like SpaceX does for its Falcon 9 rocket, which does help increase their performance, but it does constrain them to an unmovable T0 once they have begun fueling. So with that, SpaceX will now presumably pivot to their 24-hour backup opportunity, which is coming up tomorrow. That is Monday, January 20th, with the earliest launch opportunity available at 7:13 a.m. Pacific. That would be 10:13 a.m. Eastern, 15:13 UTC. We'll stand by for updates from SpaceX to see if that is in fact going to be their plan moving forward. But given that there did not appear to be any issue with the rocket or with the payload, safe to say that that will be their next launch attempt. Countdown got to T-minus 11 seconds when the hold was called. Unfortunate, but obviously want to have as safe of launch conditions for both the launch provider as well as for aviators in the area, and that's why those keep out zones are established to allow for both to operate within safe constraints. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wind down our live coverage. Unfortunately, without a launch, we will power down for now, and we'll be back with you for SpaceX's next launch attempt, which now will be more than likely Monday morning. Want to thank the folks who are with us live, and a couple quick super chats here. Thanks to Joni Mahoney for a $5 super chat, saying love spaceflight now, and the channel members, you guys rock. And to Cohen Film for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Cohen Film. Thanks to our moderator, Clistia Lee, who is helping us out today. Big thanks to our broad channel member community, to Stephen Young for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Most of all, thanks to you for wherever you're watching from. Once again, we'll be back with you for coverage of the Starlink 11-8 mission when SpaceX is ready to launch, but more than likely plan for that to be coming up here on Monday morning. And then Tuesday, just after midnight on Monday, we'll have the next launch from here in Florida. That is the launch of the Starlink 13-1 mission. Earliest liftoff for that, just after midnight. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will see you next time, folks. Until then, bye-bye.